parents themselves. No sign so far of any trouble, and Barack Obama, well, he says he's praying that the violence in Egypt will come to an end. He's not saying immediately that he wants Hosni Mubarak out. Immediately, that is, even though other senior US politicians are. Time for us to hear from Patty Culhane on the American position and how it's gone backwards and forwards a bit.
The beauty of our prayer breakfast group.
President Barack Obama's offering to the struggling protesters in Egypt at the National Prayer Breakfast Thursday.
We pray that the violence in Egypt will end and that the rights and aspirations of the Egyptian people will be realized.
A prayer not enough for some in this square who've been asking why the U.S. president won't do more and call for President Mubarak to step down now. Analysts say the reason he won't is simple.
I don't think the president should come out and insist on things where the president isn't pretty sure he's going to be able to get what he demands. The problem with having the president insist on things and not get them is then people look and say, well, you can defy the American president. We saw it with Prime Minister Netanyahu and the settlement freeze. I don't think you want to keep going down that line.
I do not.
Two senators are taking that step, both influential in foreign policy matters. Senators John McCain and John Kerry are sponsoring a resolution calling for Mubarak to hand power over to a caretaker government. But the Obama administration is resisting those calls.
It is not up to the United States to dictate who will govern Egypt.
The U.S. position has been in constant flux. Take a look.
But our assessment is that the Egyptian government is stable.
We are particularly hopeful that the Egyptian government will take this opportunity to implement political, economic, and social reforms.
I would not refer to him as a dictator.
A meaningful dialogue between the government and its citizens.
And it's not a question of who retains power.
What I indicated tonight to President Mubarak is my belief that an orderly transition must be meaningful, it must be peaceful, and it must begin now.
The Egyptian government has said it will not accept anyone interfering with its internal affairs, and the White House is downplaying that it has any power in this situation. While the U.S. does give $1.5 billion in aid to Egypt, most of it goes to the military. Analysts say the administration might hint at taking it away as a threat, but that it is unlikely to cut funding to the Egyptian military, the one relationship and presence it sees as stable and critical to U.S. interests in the region right now. In this crisis, the White House insists no one saw coming. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, these pictures, we understand, of some of the detritus that's been left around inside Liberation Square, Tahrir Square, the people having to sleep with all of the rubbish, possibly the rats that gather around with all of that sort of thing as well, but undeterred nonetheless. But the extraordinary thing, I suppose, is that much of it has been bagged up. And it's there ready to be taken away at some point in time. Or quite possibly sold on. Now, this could well be some shots of the makeshift health services that have sprung up inside Liberation Square. Clinics, pharmacies, sleeping shop assistants. Familiar scenes the world over, in many ways. Well, clearly that's what's happening in one small part of Liberation Square. We've got general coverage of what's happening in other parts of Egypt, and anti-government protests have also been called for Friday and Saturday in Syria and other countries too, waiting to see exactly what's happening there. Another of our correspondents pretty close to the scenes we're seeing now live in Cairo. Let's join her. What's your sense of what's happening?
Well, certainly here on the square, still a lot of enthusiasm.
We're only half an hour away from the curfew, but people are still pouring into the square. Now, obviously, the biggest call is for the president to leave. They call this the day of departure. But when you chat with people, they're also monitoring very closely what is happening in Washington. Everybody keeps on asking each other, what did Obama say? What did Hillary Clinton say? Because they do know that what happens in Washington, or the mood in Washington, will affect what will happen here. Now, the protesters here will tell you that they're quite convinced that at the end of all this, the president will leave. I have to say that also some very high-profile Egyptian figures have come in and out of the square today, singers, actors, but also Amr Moussa, who was the former foreign minister and now Secretary General of the Arab League. He came here and he said that he was here to see for himself. So that was seen by the people on the square, that they're actually gaining momentum and more people are joining them, and they're just not a bunch of young people who are making themselves heard, as some people try to depict them, certainly those close to the regime. As for the calls made by the Vice President for them to stop protesting, I don't think anyone is listening to that.
Hoda, anything else you think you can add at the moment which might give us an idea of where this is going and how the people are feeling? Well, it's a big crowd. There are a lot of people. I wouldn't care to be able to point out anybody I know in that crowd and say, we're trying to reach you at the moment, and since our phone line's gone down, we're going to have to move on from that one. So let's go somewhere a little bit closer to home, and not so very far from where I'm sitting. Imran Khan, who has been taking a good look at some of the comments, some of the social media stuff that we're getting here. And what have you learned?
Well, David, there's a lot of online activity coming from the Egyptian capital, Cairo. The social networking sites are getting hundreds of updates and messages every minute. And it's all about the events in Tahrir, or Liberation